Well, we may go ahead and get started, and if others join us, we can fill everyone in when we have a chance. So welcome and hello. My name is Lauren Bryant, and I am the project manager from the Boston Parks and Recreation Department for the Jeep Jones project. Very excited to be here tonight, and thank you guys for joining us. Wanted to, before we jump into discussions, make sure people know that we're recording the meeting so that it's available on the project website. It'll be available probably within about a week. So if you have any friends or neighbors who weren't able to join us tonight, please let them know that they'll be able to see the meeting there. Next slide, please. So just wanted to remind people, it's a really different experience than a lot of our typical community meetings. We would love to see everybody in person, but unfortunately we are, we're in an online presentation mode at the moment. Hopefully we can still get a lot of really great feedback from you guys in this format. And hopefully at some point soon, we'll be able to meet in the park once we have this wonderful renovation done. And please just be kind to each other and remember that we're all here to talk about great improvements to the park. In addition to the fact that we'll have discussion at the end of the presentation, just wanted to make sure those of you who may not be as familiar with Zoom, that we have other ways that you can participate non-verbally during the presentation as well. So at the bottom of your screen, there are nonverbal options such as raising your hand or yes and no options. And maybe we could try that out just to make sure everyone knows where that is. Maybe everyone could give us a yes or no answer of, do you visit Jeep Jones Park more than once a week? So let's see if everybody is able to find those. If you guys could try that for us. Not seeing any answers yet besides our design team. Does everybody see where that option is at the bottom of your screen? Okay, not seeing anybody using that yet, but maybe we can try it again in a little bit. If you wouldn't mind, next slide, please. Okay, the next slide. So first we're gonna introduce our project team and do a quick project overview. The design team is going to do a presentation for you guys. And then obviously the main reason we're here is to get input from everyone in a listening session. So if we could, next slide. So I am Lauren Bryant, like I said, project manager for the Parks Department. I've been able to work on some really wonderful parks in the neighborhood surrounding Jeep Jones, including Malcolm X Park that I'm working on right now. So I've gotten to know a lot of residents in Roxbury and have had a chance to get to know a lot of the other parks in the neighborhood and really look forward to working on this one. Christine Brandeo from the Parks Department is also on the call today. She's our community outreach coordinator, and she also works with our friends groups and helps coordinate even after the design project is over. And our design team is IBI Group, and we have two design team members with us tonight, which you'll be hearing from a bit later, Tyler Cromley and Kathy Offenberg.
Hey, everyone.
So just a little bit about the project. I guess a little bit of backstory on this. Some of you on the meeting know this. This project really came about, my understanding is from a group of very involved moms, which is amazing. So there were a group of moms who really felt like on this lower terrace of Jeep Jones, there should be more play involved. And so luckily for me, this project came about, so I get to work on it with a very wonderful group of people who are excited about the project. So now that we have started the project and are kicking off, based on the schedule you can see, tonight's our first meeting. We are going to try to do our second meeting in February and our third one in March, look at finishing construction drawings in the spring into the early summer. bidding the project in early fall and potentially start construction either in the fall or early winter of 2021, with hopefully opening the park by spring of 2022. So that's our current outlook. A lot goes into these park decisions. We wanted to make sure everybody here knew that there's so much that goes into this. There's City of Boston priorities, there's Parks and Recreation goals, there's also safety guidelines, ADA, that sort of thing. But also, most importantly, while we're here tonight, is the community input. So some of the City of Boston priorities are things like expanding walkable access to parks, helping with coordination with other departments in terms of crosswalks and ability to actually access a park, addressing equity in terms of making sure that parks throughout the city have equitable resources, climate resilience. Roxbury, I know, has a lot of heat islands and a lot of other concerns in the neighborhood. So looking at climate resiliency in the design decisions that we make, public health, which is obviously especially important right now when we need to be getting out fresh air, getting some exercise when we're all stuck quarantining, and housing and community building. And then parks and recreation goals, making sure that parks are accessible. That's an issue that we do have in this park. There's a lot of ADA concerns with the entrance and slopes on pathways, making sure we have a lot of blended, diverse, balanced use within the park, having an inclusive engagement with the community, which is what we hope to be doing tonight and continuing through this process, making sure we have resilient landscapes as well in terms of making sure that the parks actually meet quite a few different needs throughout the project. Next slide, please. So as you guys probably know that are really familiar with the park, we have renovated the upper terrace in 2012. The park was acquired by the Parks Department in 1974. And so where we're going from here is, in this project, we'll be designing the lower terrace, like we talked about, being a playground. We'll be doing construction. And then moving forward, there is, and even during design, is Boston 311 if people have any concerns with anything in the park. And then also Christine may talk a little later about the possibility of a friends group moving forward as well. So I think at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our design team, to Tyler. And thank you all. And again, if you have any questions, there's the chat function at the bottom of the screen. So if you have any questions in the middle of the presentation, feel free to jump in. And this is going to be a short presentation. And what we're really wanting to get to is your thoughts and ideas. So I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, and then I look forward to chatting with you guys after the presentation.
Thanks, Lauren. So as we all know, the park is named after Jeep Jones, who his real name is Clarence Jones. He's nicknamed Jeep. He grew up in Lower Roxbury. He was born there in 1933, and he actually lived there for most of his life until he sadly passed away in February of 2020. So Jeep Jones was a prominent community and civil rights activist, as well as a strong advocate for youth activity coordination, and that's one of the main reasons why the park was dedicated to him. He, as I said, grew up in the neighborhood, and he was always playing sports. He was a great basketball player. He actually played basketball at Winston-Salem University, and he was inducted into their Hall of Fame recently. He was Boston's first African-American deputy mayor, which was a very big deal at the time. Still is, obviously. He spent 32 years working with the Boston Redevelopment Authority and did a lot of really great things for the city. So we thought it's important to point that out and just continue his legacy as we move on with the park renovations. So we'll start by looking at site analysis, talking about what works and what doesn't with the lower terrace. But first, we'll look at the site context. In the center of this image, you can see a blue dot representing Jeep Jones Park in the Roxbury neighborhood. And these red circles all around it represent different schools, religious organizations, and surrounding parks. And one of the reasons why we showed all of these locations is we really want to get an understanding of who are the stakeholders and users of the park, and really try to hear from as many people as we can about what is the best way to improve this park. So we know that the schools around the park are James P. Timilty Middle School. We've got the Malik Academy Elementary School, sorry if I mispronounced that, as well as the Islamic Society of Boston Cultural Center, and the First Church in Roxbury is right down the street, or up the street, I guess I should say. Madison Park and Madison Park Technical High School are right across the street, as well as O'Brien School. Also very close by is the Reggie Lewis Track and Athletics Center, which is a huge neighborhood athletic facility. Down the street is Maurice Tobin School, and then there's a handful of playgrounds close by, including Gibbons Playground, the King Street Playground just up the street, and Kittredge Park, which our firm actually designed a few years back. So zooming in closer to the site, we can see the area dashed in the red dashed line shows the whole Cheap Jones Park, and it's pretty much separated between the upper terrace and lower terrace, which is divided by a big grade change. There's a steep slope along here and then stairs connecting the upper and lower. The upper terrace has basketball courts and a playground area down in this corner. This project is focusing on only the lower terrace and specifically adding playground improvements to this area. So looking at the site plan, the site is bordered to the north by Malcolm X Boulevard. There's a bus stop on this corner. To the west, it's bordered by King Street, and across the street is the elementary school and the Islamic Society Center. And the park has a circular kind of entrance plaza here, walkways all around, some amphitheater seating, and then stairs leading up to the upper terrace area. You can see the majority of the circulation highlighted in blue here. It's basically a kind of circular loop that circles this nice open lawn area, provides some nice areas to sit and benches along the walkway and look into the open lawn area. We have 4 existing entrances into the site, one in the main entrance here, and then there's 3 entrances along King Street. And I'd like to point out that only one of these entrances currently has a gate. So one of the areas we're looking to improve is enhanced perimeter security, especially now that we're introducing play equipment. We want to be mindful of kids running out of the site and just controlling the sidewalk entrances as much as possible. So you can see that gated entrance in yellow here. As I pointed out, the formal walkways are in blue. These are paved areas. There's also an informal kind of dirt path that goes from one of the gates to this main walkway. We'll want to make sure that that's paved and formalized in the new improvements. We're not touching the stairs that lead up to the upper terrace. We'll just meet these stairs at the bottom. But one area that we will be looking at is this upper terrace here, which kind of looks down onto the park, and exploring ways that we can improve that as well. So some of our circulation goals are accessible walkways. It's always important to have smooth walkways that are accessible for wheelchairs and strollers, improved park entrances, fixing some fence and gates that need improvements, and deterring access to the steep hillside behind that amphitheater area, which we heard can be problematic. And we'll take a closer look at these areas now. Accessible walkways. We'll be doing paving improvements along these walkways to make sure that all bumps and cracks are fixed. We want to make sure that the slopes are all under 5% so they can easily be traversed by wheelchairs and strollers. And we want to make sure that there are no bumpy walkway conditions like this photo on the right. Improved park entrances. We want to make sure that all of the entrances are safe and clear with smooth, accessible walking surfaces meeting the sidewalk entrance locations. We'll want to improve fencing and gates with the introduction of children's play. As I said before, now that we're really encouraging children to play and run around on the site with added play equipment, we should discuss whether everyone thinks it's important to add gates along these King Street entrances. Currently, some of the entrances are open and some of them just have a bollard preventing vehicles from entering the site, but we'd love to hear your opinion on what you think works and doesn't work for gated entrances and playgrounds that you've been to. There's some areas where the fence has just been damaged and we need to fix that to kind of increase the perimeter security and just make sure that the fence is going to be lasting for another couple decades as the park moves forward. Deterring access to the steep hillside. This is the area where we've heard reports that some older youth congregate and partake in bad activities, and there's broken glass and just not good activities happening up there. So we'll want to encourage defining this edge with lush planting, something that's nice to look at, helps to define the children's play area. Make sure that kids aren't running up there and are sticking to the defined play areas. And then also just keep out people who shouldn't be up there in the first place. As I mentioned before, we're not changing the stairs. We'll be making paving improvements at the bottom of the stairs and maybe some planting improvements on the slope, but the stair connections will stay the same. Here's a plan showing the existing programmatic elements of the lower terrace. It's largely a passively defined program, mostly revolving around this open lawn with 2 benches on either side of the lawn that look onto the lawn. As I mentioned, entrance plaza here, which doesn't really, I guess I'd like to hear whether anyone on the call uses this entrance plaza to hang out or have small group gatherings, or if it's really just a place that people pass through. But we view it mostly as an entrance plaza where people pass through. There are some small seat walls, but for the most part, we're not including in as part of the renovations. This steep hillside is not used for proper park activities, so we're going to try to plant the hillside in a way that encourages play use where it's appropriate, closer to the walkway areas, and discourage bad use up on the steeper part where it's not appropriate. We're also going to look at how we can activate this overlook space and maybe add some type of seat furnishings that will encourage people to use the space in a better way and not hang out there and drink or do other bad behaviors. There is a main central gathering space which has a paved circular area surrounded by seat walls. We're not going to change the seat walls. They've got lovely inscriptions dedicated to Jeep Jones. And so we'll clean those up. There's some graffiti on them, but for the most part, seat walls will stay. So program goals, areas where we plan to add and improve. This project will be focused on adding new play areas and play equipment. We're going to be adding more activity nodes and diversity of activities on the site, more gathering spaces of varying sizes, and how can we activate that overlook space? So one of the big questions that we need to answer based on everyone's feedback here is, what is the best play group to target for this lower terrace play area? Considering we have some play equipment in the upper terrace that's appears to be mostly for ages 2 to 5 or 5 to 12-year-olds. So for some examples of the play areas for 0 to 2-year-olds can include motor skill play, tunnels for kids to crawl in, and little bridges for them to run over. 2 to 5-year-olds, we would imagine more adventurous, natural play opportunities such as boulders and maybe logs that can be jumped on, or just natural hills that the kids can run over. Smaller play structures as well. And then 5 to 12-year-olds would have play equipment that's a little more challenging, larger scale, maybe some swings. So at this point, I'd like to pause and ask everyone what would be their preference for target age groups for play area in this location. Lauren, can you open the poll for the Zoom?
Absolutely. I'm going to launch that right now. And one of the main reasons, to echo what Tyler was saying, that we really want to ask this question is knowing that there's play equipment on the upper terrace and that a request has been made to put play on the lower terrace. We want to make sure that we really understand the needs of this new play area, because we have this opportunity to create something new that wasn't here before. So we want to make sure that we do get it right.
And that's not to say that we need to pick only one of these categories.
Absolutely.
And integrate them both.
I'm going to give it another few seconds. We've gotten 4 responses. So we've gotten 50% of people on the call voted. And I know that some of the people on here are also the speakers. So we aren't going to be voting because we want to make sure that we hear the constituents' thoughts on this. And then we don't sway it one way or the other. So I'm going to go ahead and end this poll, and then I'm going to share the results with everybody. So it looks like everyone on the call overwhelmingly thinks that this needs to be 5 to 12 equipment, which is great to hear, because in my head, I had thought some of the concerns were that there may be older kids on the upper terrace, and that's why people weren't wanting to go to the upper terrace as much. So this is really good to hear. Also, we're going to be launching a survey, which we'll give you guys the link to as well, that we'll also be sending out. So we'll be asking this question and several others in that survey as well. So I'm going to stop sharing this result and turn it back over to Tyler.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. So next we'll look at different types of seating areas and adding seating diversity. The current seating options on site are these seat walls, which have lovely inscriptions and granite seating tops. We're going to keep those and clean them up so they look like new. And then we have 2 benches that are also in good shape. We'll keep them, maybe find better locations for them, but we also want to add more seating to the site so people can have more room to hang out, as well as add more seating diversity. So we could introduce picnic tables for family or group gatherings. We could also have smaller group seating such as this with a circular table and more individual style chairs that may be more appropriate for social distancing. And then we can also add different fun seating elements for little kids, just add splashes of color here and there. And we also think it would be a good opportunity to introduce natural seating that could also be used for kids to run and kind of do exploratory play when people aren't sitting on the benches, especially since this park is kind of in a natural surrounding. It has great natural rock outcroppings and planted surrounds. So our next question, what types of seating would you most like to see added to the lower terrace, considering what types of seating are there now?
And you can choose multiple options here as well. And that doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily limit to one or another. We just want to make sure that we're getting ideas, since this is a brand new renovation that we're doing. I'm going to give it just another minute in case anyone else wants to respond to the poll before closing it out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. and share the results. And it looks like we have quite a few different ideas, which is sort of where we were leaning as well in terms of trying to really have a diversity of different experiences within this space. So it's good to see the things that got a few more votes than the others, and also good to understand what those of you on the call are really interested in. I'm going to stop sharing these and turn it back over to Tyler again.
Lauren, are these poll responses saved so we can view them later?
Christine, could you
Yes,
answer
they
that
are.
question for me? Thank you. I thought they were, but I
Okay,
didn't want to
great.
say, I didn't want to say the wrong thing.
Thanks. I guess we could always watch the recording if we had to.
I'm also recording them manually.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. So next we'll look at where some of these potential activity nodes could be located and just explore how we can incorporate different sizes of activity nodes. So the main existing activity node is this large amphitheater space, which kind of spills out onto the lawn. We think this is a successful space, so we definitely plan to keep it for larger group gatherings. And then we're also kind of exploring other ways of incorporating different sizes of gathering and play areas. We could have we could probably fit 2 medium-sized activity nodes within the lawn area and still have some open room for lawn play. And then maybe we have some smaller, more quiet activity nodes on the outer edges. This one's kind of on the hillside. Maybe it could be used for a smaller play that's incorporated into the hillside, and then different types of seating options. So this is very early concept. We'd love to hear your feedback on what sizes and uses of spaces you think would be most valuable on the site. And then the overlook space, which some of you may be familiar with, it's technically located off of the basketball courts on the upper terrace, but we think there could be a really strong connection with this overlook area between the upper and lower terrace. So we're wondering what would make the park users use this even more. Would it be beneficial to add furniture? So you could have a picnic up there or just hang out. You could add small play elements such as a telescope or sensory learning play structures for smaller kids. What do you think would be the best way to activate this space? And we've also heard reports of people hanging out up here and drinking and just not doing park appropriate activities. So I think that concludes it. At this time, we're going to open it up to questions. And if you want us to go back to any of the previous slides, just let us know.
I also wanted to jump in. We have a lot more people on the call than when we started. So I just wanted to jump in again and do another quick introduction. My name is Lauren Bryant, Project Manager for Parks and Recreation. For those of you who weren't on the call at the beginning, welcome. And thank you for joining us tonight. Also wanted to just share something that I realized I neglected to say at the beginning of the meeting. This is our first meeting for this project, and typically what we do in the Parks Department is we typically have three meetings per project, and for each park renovation. The first one is to let you guys meet us as a team, for us to meet some people in the community, for the design team, as you saw, to show a little bit of their initial thoughts on the park, some of the positives and some of the negatives, some of the questions that we have, and for us to talk about what we think of the site, what you guys think of the site, but really it's to listen. It's to hear what you guys as the community want for this park, especially since this park renovation really was community driven for us to get to this point, and for this project to come to fruition. Our second meeting is going to be in February. And what we'll do typically at our second meetings are we come back to you to show you several concepts, to show you several ideas of what we could do in this park based on the feedback that we get tonight. Then we'll take that feedback, and in our third meeting, we come back to you and say, this is the design that we came up with. This is what we think our final concept is. Did we get it right? Did we hear everything that you guys told us? And did we listen and hear, and is this what you guys want to see in your park? So that's sort of how the process works. So again, tonight is really about listening to you all. And I noticed that there are a couple questions that came in the chat. So I wanted to address a couple of those as well. There was a question about water features, and it's not something that we have, that the scope is not assigned yet, right? So unlike a lot of our parks where we have a playground and water play that we know we're renovating, this is brand new. So that's exactly why we're here tonight. So we'll definitely take that into consideration and look at that with the budget that we have and what types of play everyone here wants to see. But it's definitely something that we can look into for sure. But again, this is to listen to you guys, but I just did want to address that. So I don't know if anyone has any general thoughts or questions that they have. Please feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
How about how everyone uses the park? It looks like Firdosa may be trying to say something, but she's muted.
Firdosa, if you go to the upper right corner of your picture, it will give you the option to unmute.
The host let me unmute myself right now.
There we
I
go.
wasn't able to by
Perfect.
myself.
Good. Okay, I'm glad we got that sorted.
Yes, I was like, the host wasn't allowing me. Anyhow, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm we really appreciate all of us here. And this is something that we've been all waiting for. And one thing is that you guys mentioned that the upper terrace is not included in this project, which is something that I was hoping that it would be. And maybe what one of the sisters have asked about the water fountain or the sprinkles, it might be the space, lower terrace. If we have all this equipment, I'm not sure if there is any accessible area to do it, but upstairs was the upper terrace has a potential for sprinkles in that area. And we were hoping, the problem with the lower terrace is the slopes. There are so many slopes that doesn't allow any picnic area, or the grass is not fixed. So if that gets fixed and we have equipment for the toddlers, will be a wonderful idea. And all the ages from 0 to 12 is the potential, because upper terrace doesn't offer much. There is not much to do except the older kids to play basketball. And these are the concerns that we had. And the lightings, and because there are so many unwanted activities in the area. It's a beautiful place. It has a nice space and everything. And the kids, when they're playing, we don't want all these activities to exist, because especially the lightings are not well fixed so many times. So therefore, we would like to see the brighter the place, the more accommodating to the families and the kids. I don't think any unwanted activities will exist. And maybe picnic areas, all the above, the things that you mentioned, sounds very promising and very beautiful. We can't wait. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
It's very helpful. Can I ask a quick question about the overlook? And in terms of the comments that we've heard from our maintenance department in the parks is that there's a lot of glass from people hanging out on the upper terrace that are throwing bottles, it sounded like. And I'm wondering what people's thoughts are on the overlook, because we go up there and we see it and the view is amazing. You look out over the lower terrace and it's beautiful, but there's nothing there. And so sometimes having positive activities in a space helps to detract the negative activities. And so we're curious what people think about the idea of seating or kids' telescopes or things to bring positive activity to that area, or whether people think that that would just continue to encourage negative behavior. So I'm curious what people think about that, who know the park really well. Do we need to let you unmute again? Let's see. Christine, is there a way to let everyone unmute themselves?
Yeah, I did that, so they should be able to unmute themselves.
I tried. I wasn't able to. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Okay, I'll try it again.
You're unmuted.
We've got you now.
Yeah.
Good.
We got you, yeah. The unwanted, if that area, telescope and everything is good, at the same time, it seems like the area is so high and we're afraid sometimes when the kids are looking down that it's not fenced. I'm talking about the upper terrace. The fence is not, if there's a covering the fence to all the way, maybe a little bit higher, because you see like the 8-year-old or the 9-year-old, when they look down, it's very down steep. So
Right.
if we put a telescope in there, it will encourage them to go to that area and keep looking at it. But it's just from the safety perspective, I'm not sure how we can make them have fun at the same time. Just keep in mind it's very low, very steep area. And the activities, I think the more we have good lightings, the more we have spaces for like equipped for the little children. And I think the lighting is the most important thing, because the place always kind of dark, and then it encourages them to be a lot of people, like just to give them a space to hang out, which is very unsafe. So if we have water fountains, if we have spaces, equipment, and the telescopes that you said, as long as it's for the safety of the children, it's well, that might work, I think. Yeah. And they gamble a lot. It's not only glasses. They sit there and they play cards, they gamble.
Okay.
It gives them a lot of spaces to do things that we don't want them to do.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Mhm. So let's go back to the lower terrace. I'm going to pull up a photo that we can all look at together. You mentioned that there aren't too many flat places where you can sit and have a picnic. So that's something that's pretty high on your priority list, more flat areas for seating and maybe hanging out with smaller groups. How else do you use this site besides just taking your kids there to play? Do you ever meet with a couple other families and have a get together or have a religious group meeting? Mostly small gatherings.
We did a while ago, some picnics, but it's not a clean place and it's not an even floor. So it's not an inviting place to have a picnic. We might just gather
Right.
together and just talk, but it's not a pretty sight to be there.
But it could.
It has
So,
a potential.
yeah, if we provide those spaces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it has
Let's
potential
do
because
that.
the mosque is right there and it's a beautiful place for us to gather. Yeah.
I see a comment, the lower terrace is not used much. It's too grassy and not enough seating. So adding
Right.
seating would help that. And
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on this paved circular area that's at the base of the kind of amphitheater style seating? Is that an area that your kids use to play? Do you think it could be better programmed?
If we had equipments there, they might come, but now no one uses this area at all. We only gather upstairs, the
Yeah.
upper space.
We were thinking that one use for this circular area could be adding play equipment that's surrounded by the seat walls, but we weren't sure if there were groups like church groups, for example, who gathered around there and would like a more open paved area for just flexible use, if that's more beneficial than having a play equipment in that small area.
One of the other things that jumps into my mind, Tyler, knowing that it's not necessarily used now, is depending on the utilities and water resources and where utilities are actually run on site, that could be an interesting place for water play as well, because it is a relatively flat area. So we'll have to look at maybe where water service is on the site, which will help us potentially look at where we could run it to with the questions about drinking fountains and also water play. And I do know, just to throw it out there, we didn't turn the drinking fountains on this year due to COVID, but we did do water play, but we obviously are still planning for the future of beyond COVID for when we will be able to do things like drinking fountains again and turn those back on. I see a comment about bikes and scooters for children's use. Do a lot of kids do that in the neighborhood in terms of scooters and trikes around the upper terrace? I just think automatically that loop around, if there are other activities around, and especially comfortable places for parents to sit, because we all know the more comfortable the parents are, the longer the kids can stay and play too. So is that something that you guys think a trike loop or a scooter loop would be used a lot?
Yes, the kids use a lot of scooters and bikes because upper terrace doesn't have much except 2 swings and a slide. So therefore it's just very comfortable for them and they like it. It's fun. So they have a lot of, they use a lot of bikes.
Great. We could definitely accommodate that on the circular walkway, and we could also add a few bike racks to help with bike parking when people are on the site.
I am curious when people, and maybe people aren't imagining things in this site right now and they're waiting for us to imagine them, but I am curious if people imagine on this site, when you think about adding play, do you automatically think everything's going inside of that circular loop and that's where all the play is? Do people think that it's sort of dispersed around the site, like the diagram that Tyler showed of kind of individual little spaces? Like maybe there's a little node to play over here and a small node to play over there. Has anyone thought about what they ideally think? Like, is it one area with all the play, or is it sort of sprinkled throughout?
I imagine dispersed, not too crowded, and can accommodate more kids.
I agree with Huda. Dispersed all around might work.
It also sort of helps to sort of separate age groups a little bit as well, so that the younger kids and the parents of younger kids feel a little bit safer when there are slightly older kids playing too.
We can keep some of the lawn space for ball games and just open lawn play, but I think we can fit a couple play areas in this other portion of the lawn.
Absolutely. And there's a comment about security, and I appreciate that being brought up. One of the things that the Parks Department always does when we look at park renovations is to work with the police department and to talk to the police about concerns that they have with security, to talk about if there are things that we can do to help in terms of changes we can make in the park, but also once we close the park down for construction, one of the interesting things that we see is that whatever behaviors people may not want to be seeing, right? Whether it's dogs going to the bathroom where they don't want, skateboarders riding on things maybe that they shouldn't be, people doing behaviors that shouldn't be happening in the park. All of those activities then aren't happening in the park, right? For however long the construction is happening. So one of the things that we have talked a lot to the police about is them being aware of those behaviors, potentially moving to other locations, but also about being vigilant on patrolling when we reopen parks. Because what we find is when we revamp places, when there are newer facilities, people take pride in those facilities. There are more eyes on those facilities because there are more people using them for positive experiences. And we talk to the police about, you know, is it possible to drive by a little bit more, make sure people know that there are eyes on the park, so that as we have this new space, we can start a new, not a new regime, but a new thought of there are people paying attention to this space and wanting to make sure that with, it's just something that we talk to the police quite a bit about, and they're involved in our conversations about design too.
Adding to that, let's go back to the issue of perimeter security, and specifically the openings along King Street. Does anyone have any thoughts about the need for gates along this fence as we introduce play equipment? And how effective are gates in other playgrounds that you've been to? Or would you prefer it to be left open?
I think if no one else is gonna say something, we need gates in this area because from experience, the King Street, the cars come really coming they come down fast. And there are so many toddlers sometimes in the area that even though the sign from the King Street says slow down, but no one slows. The cars
Okay.
come fast. So the gates in this area, I think it's very important for us to have a gates for the little kids, especially if it's
that-
going to be a toddler. Go ahead.
I certainly understand that thought process for sure. What about the entrance at King and MLK, right? Where we are looking at, where are we? There we go. Oh, sorry, Malcolm X and King. I'm thinking about my other project over at Malcolm X Park on MLK. So one of the thoughts that we have talked about a lot is the main entrance at that intersection of Malcolm X and King. There isn't a gate there, right? And there's the low seat wall. And I know my kids, they tend to run downhill, right? And so with the topography and that being a really busy road with Malcolm X, and especially hearing about people coming down King Street, is there a concern about that open entrance there in terms of the fact that there are no gates currently there, right? And there's not a fence opening that's easy to gate. In terms of, I'm just wondering if there's a concern there for us to start looking at how that entrance works with the addition of play. Because it's very common to have an open entrance like that in a passive park. But when you start to introduce children, encouraging children, it's different.
And we noticed a lot of people just pass through this site, come through here, and then walk up the stairs to get kind of catty corner across the park.
I'm thinking, I mean, I feel like when they come down from the King Street, heading toward Malcolm X Boulevard, the car's a little bit slower than the beginning of the King Street. So that main entrance, which is Malcolm X Boulevard and the King Street, might, if we need an entrance somewhere, might be easier than the ones in the middle. That's my just opinion.
Okay, so it might be easier to not have a gate there, is what you're saying, than along King Street?
I think the gates, to have a gate at Malcolm X Boulevard and the King Street might be better than the ones on King Street.
Okay.
Because the cars are faster in that area, but they slow down when they coming to the end of Malcolm
Okay.
X.
Okay.
If we need to have a gate, because I think that's the only way. Yeah, that's
So
what.
ways that we could add some type of, maybe not necessarily a fence, but a physical barrier planting along this edge. So if there's a play area right here, kids aren't easily able to just run out this direction.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It could be
I
a
think-
compromise.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any thoughts about things that should be included here or things that shouldn't be included here that maybe we haven't talked about yet?
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was really interested to hear about the idea of picnicking, and I just want to make sure that we accommodate your needs with this idea. So I was wondering, like, how many people should be accommodated? Is it just kind of small family or one-on-one picnicking, or would you be imagining having larger groups for certain occasions? Have a larger picnic. I just want to make sure that we accommodate the number of people, and also whether there's a strong interest in like blankets on the lawn and just really connecting with nature in that way, or a more formal, like making sure there are lots of picnic tables and how many, and just help us understand a little bit more the needs with regard to picnicking.
I think the larger group of seating areas might work, like a picnic area, more than one individuals, like a group of families, especially when we have Ramadan time, for example. People stay up for a long time because it's next to the mosque. So people pray and come get together. And the holiday after the Ramadan is a big holiday as well. So families like to get together and just hang out and enjoy the company. So I think more seating areas as a group of individuals and group of seatings might work. And that might be, accommodating more than one family, 2, 3, 4, 5 families at once.
And I'm assuming that with those types of gatherings, when you say seating areas, is it just seating or are tables also helpful?
Absolutely tables as well, because we have a lot of elderly that likes to hang around the area of ISBCC area and these kids. So we want them to have a seating area as well.
Okay.
Tables and seatings, tables and chairs.
And when you talk about elderly people that visit the park as well, one of the things that I tend to get asked a lot is making sure that there are things like game tables or other things that maybe elderly visitors to the park might want to use. A lot of times, if they're multi-generational parks where we have a lot of families with varying ages, people that like to, grandfathers and grandmothers that like to teach their kids chess or checkers. Is that something that you think could be interesting as one of the potential small gathering spaces? Are game tables?
I'm thinking in our communities, the younger ones play more game tables than the elderly.
Okay.
The elderly they like to sit around and just chat and have their grandchildren around.
Okay.
So, and have coffee and tea.
So maybe game tables are good, but maybe not for the older generation. And I see that there's a comment about places for reading books for older family members as well, which is great. So thank you guys.
So maybe that could be a table like this round one that's flexible for different types of uses. And how about smaller, intimate, like quieter settings for 2 or 3 people? If you just want to go and have some quiet time while you're reading or have a private word with your children, is that something you'd be interested in? Smaller seating areas that are kind of off to the side?
To be honest with you, we like everything. There are communities that I'm just thinking about how many things the place can accommodate, but all these ideas are beautiful and I can't wait. There are families that like to be on their own and not gather with other people. There are families that like to be together. So everything sounds wonderful.
We'll do our best to try to fit everything in as to meet the budget and the spatial restraints that we have here.
Does anyone have any other thoughts for us? Any other, I'm going to right now into the chat, I'm putting a link to a survey that we are putting out, and it has some of the things that we've talked about already, but other thoughts and questions as well. So please feel free to fill that out, share it with your friends. In a few days, we'll be posting the meeting minutes in this presentation on our website. So for those of you who haven't been able to see it, I'll also, I'm going to type that. Actually, Christine, do you mind pulling that up and putting the website link in the chat? I'm also putting in for everyone right now my email address. So if you guys have any other thoughts or want to make sure that you're on an email list for future meetings, please feel free to email me as well, and we'll make sure that we get you guys on that too. Currently, our next meeting is scheduled, or we're hoping to have it on February 11th. So we will keep you all posted on that as well. And a big thank you to everyone. I don't know, Christine, did you get a chance to, I'm gonna try and look it up right now.
Yeah, I was getting it for
Perfect,
you.
thank you. No, that's okay. I just didn't want to, just wanted to double check.
No worries.
Thank you.
Can I make just one comment?
Absolutely.
since this project is not included in the upper terrace, the activities usually happen up there. And if that space is not touched, or the lightings are not touched, or I don't know how we can minimize people to be gathering upstairs, especially if we move the toddlers down, the children downstairs, so that's going to give them an opportunity to have that space all to themselves. So I'm just wondering if there is an idea that you guys have just to either fix the lightings or fix something there, or have parents use upstairs as well in a safer way. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, so we will definitely do an assessment of the lighting and take a look at it. One of the other things in terms of lighting are the trees. And I want to just talk about that a little bit too. There are a lot of trees on the lower terrace that are older, that are not in great shape, that from a safety perspective have a lot of dead wood. So we're going to be looking at a combination of things like removing some of the trees that are unsafe, especially with having kids down there playing. So looking at that tree assessment, and a lot of times when trees are either removed or limbed up in terms of a lighter canopy, that also helps with that dark feeling as well. So in addition to looking at lighting, we're also going to be looking at the trees, because the combination of those two helps a lot with that feeling of darkness and that you were talking about earlier. So we will be looking at that. And I think that hearing that there is a concern about the upper terrace as well, because I don't know that when this project was started that the Parks Department knew that there were still concerns about the upper terrace. We thought that it was mainly thoughts about the lower terrace. So I'll definitely bring that back to our chief landscape architect and talk through that and see if there are ways that we can maybe incorporate some things in the upper terrace as well. So we'll take a look at that, and hopefully at this next meeting, we can report back on that as well. So thank you guys for bringing up those concerns too.
I'd like to follow up on some of this. It's really helpful to us to understand the patterns that you guys have observed in the parks. And I wonder, is there a particular time, like, is it the weekends? Is it a certain time in the evening? Have you observed any particular patterns of this behavior that maybe we should even try to observe ourselves to get a better understanding of situations? So I just wondered if there's any more detailed anecdotes you have about when you have seen certain things that might be helpful to us to understand.
As soon as, we gather there usually in the summertime, and as soon as the sun goes down and place becomes a little bit darker, that's when they find the opportunity to gather and do whatever they have to do there. So the concern was not only the lower terrace, and I was a little bit surprised from the meeting when you guys started with the lower terrace. We have, when Miss Kim Janey and the commissioner came to visit the park a while ago, our concern was the upper terrace to begin with. And we said, the space downstairs doesn't even, lower terrace, no one uses it, and we don't know what we can, we would like to utilize it, but there is nothing downstairs. But the upper terrace, there are so many concerns that too many kids are there and there is nothing to do. No swings, are just the swings, maybe one or two, and the two, maybe they're broken, and there are potholes everywhere. And the tree branches that Lauren, you were talking about, they're so huge. Sometimes they're covering the few benches that we have. So the seating area is most of the time covered. And there are the sprinklers that are supposed to be upstairs. They're just there, and at 90 degrees, they're not working. And many times we call the city of Boston, 311, and we're saying it's 90 degrees, the kids are burning and the sprinklers are not working. And they keep saying, oh, we'll send somebody, and nothing. So all these add up. And when Kim Janey came, at least she was able to help us fix the potholes. And so the kids won't trip on it. And she fixed as well the swings. So the concern started from upper terrace, and went downstairs. And then we said the activities in this area is again a problem as well. So that's what led us to the lower terrace as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that background. And I will say that our commissioner is no longer our commissioner, and he is now the chief of environment, but we have a different parks commissioner. And we also have, I know Marshall was involved in some of the early conversations as well, and Christine is now in Marshall's place. So we've had a few transitions of people. So I'm glad to hear that history, because I wasn't made aware of that when I was given this project. So I appreciate that, and I'll definitely go back and ask those questions. And I know that I want to be respectful of people's time, but hearing all of that history makes me sort of want to ask the question, if we're looking at this, right, do we really need to be thinking about renovating the upper terrace instead of the lower terrace? Like, is the upper terrace really the issue and the lower terrace just needs a few small things versus an entirely new playground? Or are we looking at the right thing by putting additional play in the lower terrace and maybe trying to also do something at the upper? So I'm just curious. I hate to throw that massive monkey wrench in it, but I am curious to get everyone's take at this first meeting.
I think that's such an important question to ask, because in addition to the security and lighting issues that have been expressed here, I also heard a sense that maybe the play area is just undersized and not really meeting the needs of the groups. And maybe it's the allocation of, the design up there. Maybe there's too much basketball and not enough play. And I don't know. I think it is a really good question.
I'd be really appreciative if folks had thoughts on that. Because we want to, like we said, you guys use this park daily, weekly, monthly. So we want to make sure that we truly understand what the hopes and desires are for it before we start coming back with concepts that may not really address the concerns.
I would love to say something, but I'm hoping that I don't want to take other people's, my partners. If they're not going to say anything, I'm going to jump in.
I think everyone should jump in if they want.
What I want to say is the idea that you guys presented is absolutely beautiful. Lower terrace to be used wisely the way that you guys have designed it is absolutely needed. And I love it. And the other thing is the upper terrace needs a little bit of what you call polishing.
Mm-hmm.
It's good, but it needs just a little polishing. And when Ms. Janie came, we said the toddler area is so close to the street. What street? Roxbury Street. It's on the edge, and it seems like the toddlers running to the street is unsafe. So if this area of upper terrace where the children, the little ones are from 0 to 12, whatever, transferred downstairs, that would give us upper terrace space to do something else or to fix. And as I said, just to polish upstairs a little bit, but focus. The idea that you have about the lower terrace is absolutely beautiful. And I think it's just very, very nicely we can utilize this way. Beautiful.
So, could I ask another question about the upper terrace while we're talking about it? The play area that's on the upper terrace, does the Timilty School use that play area? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Just in terms of thinking about allocation of things, I would hate to take something away that a school uses as well. So, or change too much something that they use quite a bit.
Yeah, I was just gonna echo. Sorry, I didn't know I could unmute. Okay, so I was just gonna say that too. Yeah, I'm thinking of this from the perspective because I'm not familiar with the upper terrace location. But yeah, if you are thinking of like the other stakeholders, then I would say just the fact that the middle school is there, and right next to the middle school is the Roxbury Heritage Park, which just recently got renovated. And
Yes.
I had a walk through there, and the person, it was like amazing just learning about the history there. So that would be nice for them to have, the Roxbury Heritage Park right next to them, and then now a newly renovated upper terrace. But I know this project is like focused, so it really depends on like what you're willing to allocate to each, the upper and the lower. But if there could be some link between the lower and the upper, that would make more sense.
Yeah, well, like I said, let me go back and talk to my bosses. So what I will say though is that sometimes things, especially if we are expanding scope potentially, that could change funding. So sometimes it's not a quick answer. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at that, and I'll work with the design team to see what we may be able to do as we start to push forward. But I'll definitely, like I said, if we, and I think because you guys have all registered for this, we have your email addresses. So we'll make sure that we send you guys some updates on how those discussions are coming, as well as future meetings. And we'll also send out an email to let you know when everything was posted to the website, and also the link to the survey again as well, just in case you guys wanted to share it. So we'll do that. But I'm glad that this conversation came up, even though it was at the end of it, so that we understand some of those concerns. So I really appreciate everybody with your time and all of the information that you've given us. This is fantastic. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. And please take the survey, share the survey with all your friends who use the park.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you all, and thank you for your input. And we look forward to chatting again in the next month or so.
Thank you.